Hey everybody, in today's example we're going to show how to integrate Google Maps into our Ionic 3 application, and we're going to go through all the steps that are needed in order to get this working. The latest Google Maps SDK has changed a bit, and one thing that we'll need to do is generate two different API keys, one for iOS and one for Android. After we get those keys, we're going to install the Ionic native plugin for Google Maps, and that'll give us access to all the functionality that the Google Maps SDK exposes to us. Then we're going to get our current location using the geolocation plugin. We're going to show our location using a marker on the map. And for those of you that are not familiar with a marker looks something like this. The image is totally customizable, and a marker really identifies a location on the map. After that, we're going to show how to create a cluster. And a cluster is a group of markers. So a cluster can represent a bunch of locations that are in close proximity to each other. And then we'll show how we can zoom in and out and create more clusters out of our bigger cluster, and eventually zoom into the individual markers themselves. So let's head over to the Google Developer Console and create our application. This is the first step before we can get our API keys. So we're just going to go here, console.developers.google.com. Then on the top left, you're going to see the name of your current app, and you could have a bunch. So you're going to click over here, and then we're going to click on this plus sign. Now this plus sign is going to allow us to create a new app, and you'll notice that there is a quota. So as long as you're within this quota, you don't need to upgrade, and it looks like we're okay. So we're going to go and create our new project, the Ionic 3 Google Maps. Okay, we'll go and hit create. So the next thing we need to do is switch to the project that we just created, and we do that by clicking on this arrow, and then we're going to select our Google Maps project. Then we're going to go to the Enable APIs and Services, and where we see here Google Maps SDK for iOS, and then we're going to go here and click Enable. This is going to go and allow us to generate a key. Now the next thing we need to do is create our credentials. So you'll see here, to use this API, you may need credentials. Click Create Credentials to get started. So I'll go here, and we want the Google Maps SDK for iOS. We're going to go ahead and restrict this key. So what restricting this key means is if anybody gets access to this key, we don't want them to be able to use this, but right now it's totally unrestricted, so anybody can use it. The way to do this, the way that I like to do this, is to limit it by the identifier or the bundle of your application, and we configure that in the config.xml, and we'll go through that when we generate the Ionic app. But for now, let's give this a label. Say iOS key, and we'll say com.ionic3.Google Maps. That'll be our bundle identifier that we will use to configure this, and then we'll update it in our config.xml. So let's save these changes. Okay, now the next thing we'll need to do is we will also create an API key for Android. So to do that, we're going to go to Dashboard and Enable APIs and Services. So this time we're going to say Google Maps Android API. We will enable that as well. Okay, so now we do need to create a key for this. Unlike iOS, for some reason, Google is not giving us a button here that says create the credentials. So we can actually just click this arrow right here, and then we are going to, it actually tells us we need to use the credentials with this API, and it goes and tells us go to the credential page to get an API key. So we go credentials, we're going to create a credential, API key, and here we have, this is our API key, so we're going to save that off screen again. And then we do want to restrict this key, and we'll say this is the Android key. Android. Now, because we haven't created our Ionic project yet, we can't go and restrict this. The key is still good and it will work, and it's fine for now because we are in development mode. After we generate our project, we'll come back to this and restrict our key. But again, our key is good to use. We just shouldn't publish our application to production with an unrestricted key. So let's start and actually begin the fun part, which is creating our Ionic project and integrating Google Maps into it. All right, so let's pop open the console and create our Ionic project. Ionic start, Ionic 3 Google Maps, and we'll create a tab project. We'll just pause the video while all of these dependencies install. Okay, so our project is created. Let's cd into it.